Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with the one and only Lisa K. Donner, Graham Noble, Dave Patterson, and James Fight. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. After 15 votes last January, we had a Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. 9 months, he was ousted by his own party. Steve Scalise couldn't get to first base. Jim Jordan never left the batter's box. Finally, Mike Johnson gets the nod on the first ballot. Big sigh of relief, right? Not so fast, players. We've all watched with frustration. There was a lot of chaos, but in the end, how did it turn out for the GOP? Graham has been following this as closely as possible, poor guy, and he's now up at bat.
Well, obviously, the first thing I would say, and it hardly needs expressing, is the fact that the GOP managed to at least put the debacle of the House Speaker fight behind them. In terms of going forward, I think they are in possibly a better position legislatively than they were. But here's the interesting thing about it is how did the Democrats how did they fare at the end of this fight? Because I wrote an article for Liberty Nation where I posited the idea that this really backfired on them because they got rid of McCarthy, but now McCarthy is replaced by someone who is certainly more of a hardline conservative. He's less likely to bend at the knee to the Democrats, which is what McCarthy has done and was likely to continue doing. So even though I said that really this didn't turn out so well for Democrats, but there's another side to that story, and that is that maybe it turned out exactly the way they wanted, because you see the Democrats, I believe, are actually much more interested in scoring political points and firing up their base and getting reelected and retaining control of the White House than they are in actually passing constructive legislation and actually doing their jobs for the American people. So from that point of view, getting rid of McCarthy was actually good for them, because they got rid of this guy who they could never describe McCarthy as a right-wing extremist, a MAGA Republican, a demagogue. But now they've got someone in the Speaker's chair that they can describe as that. So in a way, in terms of political point scoring, this was a win-win for the Democrats. But in terms of just legislative progress, I believe it was a win for the Republicans.
Graham, let me just pick a bone with you. I think the first argument that you posited was the correct argument, and that is, McCarthy was ready to do a deal with anybody who came across his path. I don't think so much with Johnson. I think they did sort of shoot themselves in the foot legislatively, and they're going to pay for this. Yeah. And if a few of them had crossed over and saved McCarthy's rear end, I think they would have been in a better position than they are now. I'm just saying.
Absolutely. From a legislative point of view, from a point of view of governing responsibly, you are absolutely correct. They did completely shoot themselves in the foot. But I believe that, I have a feeling, and it's sad to say really, but I have a feeling that a lot of Democrats were much more interested in sowing chaos and then being able to point to the guy in the Speaker's chair as a MAGA extremist, which they couldn't do with McCarthy. So again, in terms of from a partisan point of view, this turned out better for Democrats, but from a legislative point of view, yeah, you're totally right. They shot themselves in the foot.
I kind of think it's a hot mess, because the Speaker of the House is supposed to be able to find the deal, cross the aisle, make connections. That's the job of the Speaker, not to be the only guy or only gal that says, no, screw you, it's our agenda or nobody's agenda. My biggest problem is, I hate to say it, Nancy Pelosi made it look easy. I mean, she just kind of skated around and did her thing and was kind of rude and kind of dressed up all the time. But, Jim, do you think this will go down in the books as one of the best or one of the worst?
Well, it's definitely going to go down in the books. Well, I'll give you that. This is you kind of ran through the history in the intro for this segment, and this is the first time we've had this kind of a speaker battle. Well, it was the first time when McCarthy got elected for speaker. It was the first time since the Civil War we've had that many tries to get a speaker elected. First time in U.S. history we've had a speaker removed, and it's the same dadgum speaker. And then another yet again one of the longest speaker battles to finally go through. Well, not this guy. Oh, nope, not that guy. Okay, another third guy. This is the one we're going to use. It historic for sure. Is it going to be good? I'm kind of with Graham on this. This might be a little bit better for the Republicans legislatively, but yeah, Mike Johnson's the guy the Democrats can campaign on. That's for sure.
Which
I
was
think I missed the days of Tip O'Neill.
I know. I was just thinking about him too.
Yeah.
Which was the question? Is this going to be good? Meaning the speaker, or that the Republicans went through all this hoo-ha? I was trying
the hoo-ha part. I mean, it's
that's
embarrassing.
What's going down history for sure.
People are embarrassed to think their government can't pull this off. And then again, I have people asking me all the time, who is this Mike Jackson guy? It's like, well, it's Mike Johnson. And they're like, well, who is that?
Who?
They have no idea who this guy is. So and I don't really know him other than what I've learned, but I know Lisa does. So Lisa, what do you know? It's
funny. My text blew up that day, and I had a number of friends saying, have you ever heard of this guy? Do you know anything about this guy? Can you tell me something about this guy? It's really funny. But I just want to go on record as saying, Graham, who was covering this whole hoo-ha, as we're calling it, I'm sort of upset that it settled so fast there, because I know he wanted to write at least a dozen more stories on why
buried in hell of a circle of hell of his own creation.
Exactly. Like, why can't the GOP get their act together? But
Lisa, I had actually already written 221 articles, which were, for one for each of the Republican members of the House of Representatives, when they got their chance to run for speaker.
I really thought you were going to start taking hostages if they didn't come up with somebody. It was really funny.
The diciest part was Graham's behavior.
Keep him on the shelf, Graham. There's no guarantee this guy's going to last.
But I think it should be noted that maybe the Democrats, we can argue about whether they gained or lost, but I think the Republicans really gained, and we shouldn't forget that. McCarthy, again, he was a deal maker, and Johnson's a bit more of an ideologue, and I think the GOP is going to gain from having somebody in there who can speak to both the MAGA folks and the non-MAGA folks. And in terms of who he is, he's a Republican from Louisiana. He's a strong professing Christian. He has a passel of kids. He came from a home where he was, I think, the oldest of four. His father was a firefighter who was badly injured in duty. And Mike really wanted to grow up to be a firefighter. And his parents were like, no, I don't think so. We're not going there. So he ended up going to law school. He was in the Louisiana legislature. And then he hit the U.S. House of Representatives in 2017. But the interesting thing about him is he's really been flying under the radar. I mean, raise your hand if you've heard of Mike Johnson before this whole business. You did? Okay, that's because you've worked.
I heard of him only by virtue of the fact that he was a representative from Louisiana. So I knew him from that. That's.
I confess, I did not know much about him. Sarah, Jim, what do you guys say?
Never heard the man.
I knew nothing. Knew nothing.
But I think
had to go to the Google.
Right. That was his charm. See, he flew under the radar.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering. I mean, maybe, just maybe, people were so caught off guard. And that's what I was going to ask Dave. I mean, do you think, instead of picking somebody that everybody knows, do you think they picked this random guy in Louisiana that nobody knows except for Lisa right now on panel? Do you think that was strategy, or was that just dumb luck, Dave?
No, I think that they actually did some thinking about this and chose a person who was steeped in conservative values, but that everyone liked. He is a likable guy. He's an ideologue, but he doesn't gag you with his views. And it also showed something to me, and it may be nuanced, but it showed me that when you have a Democratic Party who vote in lockstep, that can sometimes be a negative, not a positive, because they could have crossed the aisle and gotten whoever they wanted. But the fact is they didn't. They were unified, and that unification got them Mike Johnson. And I think
exactly.
I don't know. This whole process has been absolutely, I'm going to say clownish. Honestly, I've never been around this in all my political days. Jim, you look like you want to say something. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you call it clownish, but I mean, the circus has always been entertaining, and this is nothing if not entertaining.
I mean, it could be entertaining, but the whole thing leading up to 2024, we're just a hop, skip, and a jump away. And that's going to have an impact, whatever Republicans have done and whatever Democrats have done. And as we barrel into this, it's like, who knows who's ahead? They're all acting like morons.
No, you're right, Sarah. You're right.
In my estimation.
And we got to look forward to, Jim Jordan was a firebrand, right? But you look at somebody like Mike Johnson, and I think what you're going to end up with is somebody who's pretty darn savvy. Look at his budget right now. His supplemental appropriations gives $14.3 billion to Israel. And where did he take the money from? Anybody know?
The IRS.
Yeah.
IRS.
Slash the IRS budget. That puts the Democrats in a tough place. So now they can say, no, we want the money to go to the IRS. We don't want the money to go to the Jewish state. Really? That's not a great place to, I think, to have to defend yourself from. So
well, that's why, yes, legislatively, this is good for, Mike Johnson gives Democrats the perfect excuse to fire out their base and say, look, well, the Republicans now in the House are being led by a demagogue, a right-wing extremist, blah, 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 an election denier, despite the fact that the Democrats in the House are also led by an election denier. But that's another story. But here's the thing. And, if you look at especially over the last maybe 15, 20 years or so, and I'm sure if your better half or maybe your worse half, Lisa, Tim Donner, were here.
Oh, definitely my better.
With his knowledge, he would agree with me that generally speaking, the pattern of legislation in Congress is that whichever party proposes a bill, they'll get together and they'll fight it out between the two parties, and it will usually end up that they come to some kind of deal. Democrats get a bit of what they want, Republicans get a bit of what they want, and then once the legislation passes, Democrats turn back and say, oh, well, you know what, even though we agreed to give you what you wanted, we're actually not going to do that now, but we got what we wanted. And so often the Democrats have won those legislative battles. And with someone like McCarthy at the helm, holding the gavel, they could continue to do that. With Johnson in there, I think they'll have a much harder time doing that.
I thought you were going to say once they passed it, then they decided to read it.
Well, yeah, you got to pass the bill so you know what's in it. Yeah, of course.
Oh, man.
You don't know how that happens very often with the top folks. They don't read it until after it's all said and done. Well, we should be glad that this mess has been settled. Whether or not Johnson can make it to term, well, we will see. And we will keep you posted as always. Thanks, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking, and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.